Well, hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about the black hole bomb, among other things. And it is Tuesday, April 29, 2025. The first thing I got an article by Robert Wright that I liked saying how you may find yourself on the front line of Trump's crackdown on immigration because now he's prosecuting a judge who tried to protect one of her uh, defendants by letting him go out the back door. And they're suing the city of Rochester, New York, shooting its officials of illegally impeding immigration enforcement and targeting all other sanctuary cities. So this means, I think, if you're like AOC, which Robert Reich has recommended and seemed like a good idea to me, that you help your immigrant friends know their rights. And AOC printed out a card and handed it out to immigrants that says, like, here are your rights according to the law. And there is a Republican that wants to prosecute her for that. So anyway, it's a thing to be aware of. Like the protesting, any attempt to resist the Trump regime places you at threat of arrest. And the safety, this is like many things, the safest procedure is not to hide and do nothing. The safest procedure is for more people to step forward so they can't arrest us all. And it stops the forward march of the totalitarian government that just like to rule everything about us. And, this is like, I was thinking it's like surgery. You take a small risk now because it's better than the alternative.
Yeah,
But it is a thing to be aware of. I was talking to the protesters last weekend saying, we are risking arrest, of course, but it's the right thing to do. And the risk gets smaller the more of us are out there.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Like a union, like colleges. Apparently, a lot of colleges are now trying to band together to push back against Trump. And he's amazingly bad at making deals for a guy that claimed to be an expert at this. Like Columbia caved, so then he just demanded more. This is just what they tell you. Don't bother giving a bully something because they'll just punch you again and take more.
Yeah,
And he seems to be that
yeah.
way, Whereas, if you made a request and then settled for a reasonable amount, then maybe people would find it more palatable to make a deal. But in fact, there's no point giving him anything because he'll just take more until you can't stand it. So the thing to do is resist him right from the start. Anyway, they are targeting international students. I saw an article that said that they've now revoked over 1,600 student visas. So, people that are here legally suddenly are not legal. And they're going to the college campuses and nabbing them. I haven't heard of this happening at City College yet, but I imagine it's happening at every college. Um, and the seasonal COVID shots that have been updated once or twice a year, they want to end them. The FDA has treated them as like the flu shot, where they don't have to go through a complete approval every year with randomized controlled trials, spending millions of dollars and months or years testing it, because it's essentially the same as last year's. But they want to remove that treatment of COVID shots, making it essentially impossible to update them every year, which would, fit the RFK Jr. philosophy of hating vaccines and trying to basically get rid of all vaccines. So things continue as normal. And
Yeah.
also,
Well,
yeah,
wait, Sam.
yeah.
So I believe they've already disbanded the portion of, I'm not sure if it's the FDA or the seasonal flu shot.
Yeah, I think they haven't chosen this year's seasonal flu shot yet because
No,
they
no,
delayed the
no.
meeting.
The group's gone. The data is gone.
The data's gone. Oh, great. So maybe there won't even be
That's
seasonal flu shots anymore.
yeah, I may have overspoken,
Yeah,
but I remember reading a headline
yeah.
and I didn't dive into the article,
Yeah, I saw one a
but
couple of weeks ago that said that the monthly meeting the meeting they were supposed to have to choose the flu shot was delayed. And it did happen later, but I'm not sure if they even chose the new flu shot yet. So, this is what you expect under RFK Jr. is that all
right,
vaccination will be like blocked or prevented, as much as possible.
right, exactly. So
Yeah.
maybe you'll take a moment to look at that. Why don't you continue?
Okay. Well, the Justice Department has removed the people that look for voting fraud. There is a voting unit that was considered the crown jewel of the Justice Department because, of course, it came through in the civil rights era where the main target was not letting black people vote. And now that, of course, Trump's fascists want to stop people from voting. And I think after the recent polls, more than ever, the Republicans are doing things that are very unpopular. So the only way they can stay in power is by suppressing voting. In a fair election, they won't win. So they have instructed the career employees to dismiss all their active cases without meeting with them and without offering a rationale. So they're just dropping everything and ending enforcement of voting rights so that
All
the
right, so Sam,
Republicans,
let
yeah,
me
Go ahead.
let me jump here in
Yeah.
here on one of these on with voting, but I just looked here. The statement, this is AI generated, so take it for what it's worth. Statement that the flu shot was discontinued by Trump is inaccurate. While there were concerns raised during the Trump administration about FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee meeting and the CDC's wild to mild campaign, the flu vaccine itself was not discontinued. So
All right.
that doesn't say the research on it wasn't discontinued.
Yeah, that's why I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I know they did have a delay. It's not proceeding as usual. Whether it's ended entirely, I think is not clear yet.
yeah. So this was March 6, 2025. Senator Patty Murray, I'm not sure, do you know who she is?
I don't.
On her website, she's saying that there was a cancellation of a meeting, of a critical vaccine meeting. Maybe that's the story they heard.
Hmm. All right.
Oh, no, this one's on contraception. Oh my
All right.
gosh. Okay. I wrong path. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I've got
Anyway,
one. Yeah.
here's my story.
All right.
You're talking about voting, right?
Yeah.
All right. Remember Mike Lindell of My Pillow fame?
Oh, yeah. Him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he's back in the news again.
I saw his article about his lawyers going in with a brief written by AI again.
Yeah, it was a brief written by AI into a federal court.
Yeah.
And I guess the judge read through it and found that there were 30 fake false citations, court cases that never occurred and rulings that never or court cases that never existed and rulings that never took place.
Yeah. I thought everybody knew this by now. I wonder if it's time for judges to just start giving people contempt of court for doing this. It's
Well,
not a
we'll
secret.
yeah, we'll see what's going to happen, but pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, it does suggest that Lindell is scraping the bottom of the barrel to get lawyers, which would make sense since he's broke.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
he wasn't a billionaire, was he?
Oh, I think he was, but now he owes like 2 billion in lawsuits.
Yeah, because he was suing everybody, right?
Well, yeah, I think they all sued him too, and I don't thought it might have been for voting machine falsehoods.
Yeah.
But I think he has like a podcast or a TV channel, and I think he repeated all the stuff blaming the voting machine manufacturers, and they sued him. Something to do with Trump. Trump and he had a big deal about that. I remember he had one of my guys I knew actually went into a meeting he ran to analyze what he called the PCAP files that proved that China had hacked the election, and they weren't even PCAP files. So. So he hired a bunch of like techs who just took him for a ride, pretending to find evidence of voting fraud when it was just random files and made no sense at all. And he had a special meeting where he offered a prize for anyone that could prove that they weren't, I think like a $10,000 prize if you prove that this was not evidence of the Chinese hacking the voting machines. And somebody did that, and then he tried to not pay them, but got sued and had to pay them. Anyway, it's been a disaster for him. Like Elon Musk, he had a company and apparently he's making money at the company, but when he veered into politics, he destroyed himself. If he
Yeah.
just stuck to
Yeah.
pillows, he probably would have been fine. Just like if Elon Musk had just stuck to making the cars, everybody would just love him. There'd be no problem.
Yeah. So I'm looking here. He was worth 100 million and maybe high as 200, 300 million prior to the election.
Yeah, I think he was one of the main advertisers on Fox News.
How, di- just by selling pillows?
Yeah, apparently that was his thing.
What? How
Yeah.
can you make so much money selling pillows?
Well, I guess there's a lot of pillows out there.
I guess so. It said,
Yeah.
um,
People make a lot of money selling soda and, branded steaks and everything else, Why not pillows?
yeah. So he became entrenched conspiracy theorist
Yeah.
and subject to a 1.3 defamation charge.
1.3 what billion?
Defamation charge. Oh yeah, 1.3 billion defamation
Right.
charge.
Which
His
is more than he
company,
has.
yeah, says company generated over 100 million per year in gross revenue.
Yeah.
The guy could have bought an island.
Yes, he could have done, like I say, these billionaires could do something sensible, but instead they go destroy themselves. It's very Shakespearean.
Huh. So products were best sellers at Walmart, Bed Bath and Beyond, Kohl's, HEB, Wayfair, Canadian Shopping, Broadcast Channel. Based on my pillow was worth about $500 million in
Yeah.
2017. Okay,
Yep.
he could have been a billionaire.
Yeah. This is the we're seeing it everywhere. You have something that's working fine, like the U.S. economy, and then you put a madman in charge that burns it all down for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
So, as all the community college teachers I know have seen the same thing, there's suddenly a huge surge in fraudulent students. All my classes were full, all my waiting lists were full. They were obviously fake students. I was able to easily identify them. The names had clearly been pulled from like a list of common names, and the departments were from 5 departments, all of which had nothing to do with computer technology. So for my advanced courses, it was obvious they weren't real students. But in other classes, it's not as obvious. And this is a really big deal. And so Cal Matters did an article claiming that they've lost more than $10 million in financial aid, from federal financial aid and $3 million in state aid going to these fraudulent students over the last year. So now California's Republican representatives want to start investigations of the community colleges to do something about this. So we can probably expect trouble at the community colleges as the feds come in. What they really want, of course, is to end TEI and shut down our Middle Eastern studies and women's studies programs and such, and get us to stop harboring fugitives and deport all our foreign students. But they might use this as the wedge into you to get in. It is, by the way, true that there's a bunch of fraudulent students on the rolls. So that would be the actual thing that's true that causes them to get in. So we'll see. I expect trouble over this in the next 6, 9, 12 months.
So Sam, what's the goal? Is this for to boost numbers, or
No,
who's behind it?
that's somebody outside the college is doing it
Yeah.
to make the financial aid money.
Yeah.
Make fake
Okay.
personas and then somehow they collect the money. That's what I understand. Although they haven't caught them and exactly detailed why they're doing it and how they're doing it. But it's been happening for years. It's just gotten a whole lot worse this year.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. All right. Well, I got a question. You want a funny one, or you want a not so funny,
Well, just pick
disappointing
one.
one?
Sure. Just pick one.
Funny one?
Sure.
Okay. This is from Australia. This is pretty funny. Radio station there has been using an AI DJ for 6 months
Oh,
and nobody's noticed.
well, and now that you mention it, that seems like that would work because the DJ doesn't really say anything that matters anyway, and they can be sort of crazy and nobody really cares.
Yeah, so there was an AI that had been hosting the show from 11 to 3,
Yeah.
playing music and, talking regular DJ stuff.
Yeah.
And it turns out the voice that was used was modeled after their financial guy at the radio station.
Yeah. Well,
And nobody noticed. Now
yeah.
they're mad that it's AI.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess you might feel upset. I don't know, but this is, of course, they've been talking about AI replacing humans, and it hasn't really happened much. But this is a case of it apparently working.
Yeah, here it's worked. And that
Yeah.
was part of the iHeart Radio network, which
Oh,
is in the US.
yeah, yeah. I listened to
Yeah.
Keith Olbermann on there.
All right. So here's the flip side. Do you hear what's going on in Chernobyl? And this one, I'm
Oh,
curious. I've not seen this in the news.
you haven't heard anything about Chernobyl in years.
Yeah. Well, so I I can't fact check this, but sources are saying, and there's video footage of this, that the Russians bombed Chernobyl and they hit the confinement sarcophagus.
Recently?
Yes, yeah. And it started a fire in the
Wow.
containment dome.
Did a
And
missile go off target that was headed for Ukraine or something?
well, it depends who you ask.
Yeah,
So let me talk about the damage first,
yeah,
and then I'll let you draw your own conclusion. So the missile that hit it is not that accurate, but it did go through the walls of the containment structure, which then caused a fire. And it's a double wall with insulation in the middle of it. And the insulation caught on fire. So to put the fire out, fire crews had to start punching holes into the confinement dome. And the way the confinement dome was working, it was lower pressure. So it was always sucking air in to prevent the radiation and dust or radioactive dust particles from leaking out. So I guess they spent over $2 billion. I don't know how long it took, but it's on railroad tracks where they slid it over the top. And apparently, I guess it had been working. Now there's a hole in it. So it's letting radiation out. Now, Russia denies that they did it. This would be a war crime under whoever decides whatever entities. I guess that's the world that decides what war crimes are. And Russia claims that it's pure propaganda. Now, you could go either way on this, and maybe this is more propaganda, but it turns out that Ukraine has four other power plants, nuclear power plants, and and they're claiming that the other three out of the other four have been fired upon but not hit.
Hmm. Is
So
Chernobyl in
Russia,
Ukraine? I thought
pardon?
Is Chernobyl in Russia or is it in Ukraine?
No, Ukraine.
Oh, well, then it makes a lot more sense for the Russians to bomb it. Okay.
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
It's in the Ukraine exclusion zone,
Yeah.
pre-PET, right? That's all
Yeah, but
still
anything in
excluded,
Ukraine is fair game, I imagine, for the Russians.
except for the power plants. And I think Chernobyl was the final power plant was shut down around 2000, 2005. So after the disaster struck, the other power plant or plants at Chernobyl continued in operation for
Yeah.
another, 30 years?
Yeah, they've got another big one running, which Russians are currently controlling, although it's in Ukraine.
Yeah. So, I don't know. But this would be a disaster,
Yeah, well, it sounds
right?
pretty typical for the
Yeah.
Russians. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Putin keeps hinting, I kind of read this in the story, that they have nuclear weapons
Oh,
and
yeah.
that he wouldn't be afraid to use them if needed.
That's right. That's been his argument all along. And
Yeah.
Trump's is that Zelensky needs to just give up to avoid nuclear war. That's been his
Yeah.
argument right from the start. Yep.
Well, but wasn't it Trump who was elected, pardon me, on his campaign path trail said, if I'm elected, the war will be over in 24 hours.
Right.
I can get him to
Uh,
agree.
And that's what he's trying to do by just telling Zelensky, you just need to give up. That's his plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow Zelensky's not going along with that.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a guy on a YouTube channel who has a YouTube channel, goes by Bald and Bankrupt, and he speaks fluent Russian. And I think he lived in Ukraine or Russia for a number of years. But he had a whole series of travel videos where he'd travel across parts of Russia into areas in Russia that people in countries that Americans or, very few people would go to. There's no reason to go there. And he showed what life was like. And the way I found out about him was probably about 8 years ago, and when he was going through Chernobyl and talking to the Russian grandmas, the babuskas, that were still living in the exclusion zone. And life was okay for them. They didn't
Yeah.
seem to have cancer. So, and then, he traveled around. And so he went to Ukraine and he was saying, this is Ukraine. And if Russia's going to invade, this is before the war. They're going to come through that valley over there with their tanks and start bombing the city. And he was on one or the last train that left the city that was first bombed. And sure enough, the next morning, the Russian tanks did come through. And he showed what life is like there. And it's interesting because the Ukrainians there, they're mostly older adults. The younger people have left, but it's still, a lively town with bombed out buildings, and they don't like Trump. And obviously, they don't like Putin, but they can't leave because they have family that's there.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. He went around and he showed the different villages and he just talks to people. So one could say this is all propaganda, but I think if you watch the videos, yeah, I don't think it's propaganda. I think it's really man in the street kind of videos. And that's all his videos have always been. He buys
Yeah.
somebody vodka and says, can I talk to you? And they're no, 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 no. All of a sudden he pulls out a bottle of vodka and then it's, oh, comrade, come talk. Let me show you my home.
Yep.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your next story?
Yeah. All right. So there's Trump made an act called Take It Down to stop AI deepfake porn, and it has now passed the Congress, and he's going to sign it. And the privacy experts like the EFF are very upset because what it says is it requires platforms to remove both real and AI generated, non consensual intimate imagery within 48 hours of victims' reports. And the problem is that means they would have to have no encryption so they can see whether it fits in that category. And if they're going to have to remove anything within 48 hours, they're going to have to just remove it without looking at it, like the DMCA. And Trump said, after you pass this, I'll use it to take down people that criticize me. So
Yeah.
it's just going to be yet another, way to just take down anything. Just accuse it of being this, and then it's too much bother to prove that it's not. So we'll see, but apparently it's going to become law and pretty soon.
Yeah. So there are a number of complaints with the FCC. I know that Trump had one against Saturday Night Live,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
don't know if he sued, but he said it's unfair. I want equal time.
Well, now he's suing all the polls. All the people that took polls that says his approval rating is low, he's suing them all for daring to say
Yeah.
that. So, I mean, he wants to clearly turn us into North Korea where he can just order people what the news is and cover it. By the way, Amazon said they're going to put a tariff fee on Chinese goods now, showing how much is going to be the 145% tariff. And Trump said that's a hostile and political act, and he wants to stop them from doing that. So, he'll want to force the news media to cover up the consequences of his actions. And he may very well succeed the way American news agencies are all just caving.
Yeah. So speaking of Amazon, Bezos, have you seen his new truck?
I didn't.
So it's an all electric vehicle. It's a truck. And I think the starting price is 20,000.
Oh, that's
Now,
interesting. I didn't, and Amazon makes it?
well, Bezos I've seen ads for it. It's called the Slate.
Oh,
And here's what you get feature wise. At first I thought it was Chinese. There's no radio, it's not painted, there's no electronics, it's all manual for the most part, meaning if you want heat, you have that knob that you have to turn. It's not touch screen.
good.
So if you order, and I believe he's taking orders for it. So if you want a different color, you have to get it wrapped,
Yeah.
right? Get your car wrapped like a Christmas present,
So it sounds like
which,
it's kind of a do-it-yourselfer.
yeah, it is. And from what I've seen, the truck doesn't look that bad. I mean, it looks like a Ford F-150.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the range is. And I'm not sure if he's taking orders yet or not, but I just saw ads pop up, actually, many
Wow.
ads.
Well,
And
that's very interesting. I mean, a cheap
maybe
EV,
it's,
there's a market for
yeah,
cheap EV. They cost too much.
yeah,
In
yeah,
fact, half
yeah,
the time, this is what Musk says he's going to do at Tesla is make a cheap EV.
yeah. Here, Slate Auto, reserve now. We build it, you make it.
Well, interesting to see what comes of it. All right.
So you can personalize it. You go to Slate. Oh, you can reserve one for $50.
Yeah. Sounds like
Expected, yeah.
sounds like
E-
Kickstarter.
Yeah, expected price under $20,000.
Okay, so they don't really exist yet.
No,
And
you reserve one for $50. You pick up pre-installed with stuff, choose your battery size, whether you want a truck, SUV, kit. I like that kit. You pick a color, you pick your wrap. You can have your wrap applied before delivery, or you can wrap it. That's what
Mhm.
Tesla did with the Cybertruck.
Oh,
To
I didn't know that.
save money, no paint.
And it still cost like 80,000.
Yeah, yeah. And then you pick your accessories in the Slate Maker, I guess, app and add them to whatever you want.
Yeah,
So we'll see. We'll see how that works. But you start with $50. Who can't afford that? And that's kind of how Elon started, right? With
I don't know.
people giving him deposits, which was essentially a free loan.
I know a lot of tech companies have done that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
What
got
else you got,
well, I
Sam?
got some InfoSec ones. So there's a letter that you can sign if you want to. Prominent security experts are signing a letter telling the Trump administration to leave Chris Krebs alone. So I signed it. That's the EFF has made such a letter. We'll see what that does. But
Is,
it's a,
is, is that Krebs on security, right? Chris
no, that's a
Krebs?
different
No.
guy. Chris Krebs was the head of CISA under Trump. And
Ah,
he said that nobody hacked the 2020 election. So after that, Trump hates him forever. And now he revoked his security clearance and that of the company he works for to kill their business. And he had to resign from the company hoping that they can survive. And this is the kind of, intimidation of innocent people for saying the truth that I disagree with and I'd like to push back on.
okay.
And then I
Okay.
got the tech story that I thought had the best name, the black hole bomb. I didn't know this, but apparently, if you have a spinning black hole, matter falls in, and they say if you could have a spinning mirror on the outside of the black hole spinning at the same rate, it would cause the light emitted by the stuff falling into the black hole to positively reinforce and cause it to make an incredible amount of energy really fast and blow up like a bomb. And you could also make, I guess, a power plant out of it by tapping off the energy. And so, what this guy did was he made a model of it using magnetic fields and I guess microwaves with a spinning aluminum disc in this aluminum cylinder in the center and a mirror on the outside. And instead, spin it at the right rate. There is a positive reinforcement, and you get an amplification of the oscillating magnetic field. So he proves that the point is true. So that's apparently been, it was
Wow.
proposed in 1969. And he's now made a sort of scaled down model of it to show that, in fact, you do get an amplification of power. So there's no immediate practical
Right.
application of this, but it is one of those theoretical things. Like I know if you read science fiction about thousands of years in the future, they often talk about a society powered by a black hole. And I never quite understood how that works. And this is one way you make an engine driven by a black hole.
Hmm. So how do you capture the energy?
Well, I guess it creates huge amounts of radiation, and you can just use that.
And the heat from the radiation generates steam, right?
Something like that. I mean, essentially
Yeah.
solar panels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
just put a Dyson sphere around a star and use the star's solar radiance directly, but apparently that is not as much as you get out of a black hole.
Yeah. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's been a lot of videos about black holes from credible scientists, I will say, or credible reporters on science.
yeah. I mean, we found a lot of them. They seem to be experimentally verified as much as anything can be in astronomy.
Yeah, right, right, right. Let's see, I got another one here. Nixon's legacy. Have you heard about this?
No?
So there's a campaign, not sure if you know, I didn't know this, but Trump met Nixon and Nixon sent Trump a letter, and Trump is really proud of that. Has Nixon's letter framed and is on the wall behind him. Okay. So it turns out that there's a campaign out here to rewrite history, that Nixon wasn't such a bad guy after all, and that Watergate and Nixon stepping down was an attack against him by non elected government officials.
Well, you could say that. Certainly what he did is nothing compared to what Trump did, so you could certainly argue that it was unjust by that grounds.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just kind of interesting because a lot of what they're claiming to be incorrect or propaganda turns out you can hear to the contrary with the Nixon tapes. So what they're claiming, you can listen to the tapes and you hear quite to the contrary.
Oh, okay.
So now what we're trying to do is make Nixon look like a better guy. He was persecuted by, as they say, non-elected officials.
Yeah, well, Trump said he wants to replace history with patriotic history, and maybe this would
Yep.
be part of it. Whitewash Nixon.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. You know, we're like Japan. Japan talks when about the Imperial Army, Navy, or Imperial forces, and how they were doing so well until about 1941 came along, and then they kind of skipped forward to 1945, and how the Americans came in.
Yeah, so do we. Most Americans think that America saved Europe on D-Day, and Europe didn't really do anything to save themselves. And whereas it was actually the Russians that defeated the Nazis, but somehow you don't learn that in American history classes.
Yeah, that is really interesting because there was a pact with Stalin that Roosevelt had,
Yeah.
and that 90 days after VE Europe, that Russia would attack the US, would attack Japan. And we dropped the two, right? I was always taught the premise that the two atomic bombs ended the war, and that Japan, although they were in chaos after the first one, after the second one, they still weren't going to surrender.
Hmm.
So it wasn't until Russia started massing forces that Japan surrendered. So that's kind of the history that I'm hearing now from non-American historians. But
Yeah,
it's not good propaganda, right?
that's right. That's right. This is
Yeah,
patriotic history, uh,
yeah, yeah.
like George Washington and the cherry tree.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so it turns out that Microsoft's Azure SQL Server has a pretty significant flaw. You can create a firewall rule, and then you can delete the firewall rule. But unfortunately, the firewall rule is apparently just stored as a file in the file system, and you can give it a path that goes dot dot slash, and if you do that, it deletes all the software, wiping out the server entirely.
Wait, what?
You give the firewall rule a name of dot dot slash star.
Yeah,
Then it
yeah.
just refers to everything in the parent directory and deletes it all when you delete that rule. So
Oh,
they,
when you delete the,
yeah,
yeah, okay, now I get it.
yep.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's an arbitrary file delete vulnerability, and I think it's been patched now. But that's a pretty silly
Serious
vulnerability.
one. Yeah,
Serious and pretty silly, path traversal. I remember 10 years ago, I heard Joe McCrae giving a talk, and he said, path traversal hasn't been a real vulnerability since Jesus Christ walked the earth. Well, it's still a vulnerability now. The EFF, was the EFFC's about a few months ago made an article saying, guys, why don't you stop making stack-based buffer overflows? What's going on here? I thought this should have been gone decades ago. Why are you still making software with this flaw?
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
bunch of these
yeah.
old things, they never go away.
True,
Yeah.
true,
And
true.
somebody found that real-time deepfake fraud is here. They have videos. You can have like a Chinese old guy appearing to be a young white woman with a convincing voice, and they're using it to fraud people. So they say you really can't trust anything anymore. They're
You know, I just brought up the radio station for 6 months. Nobody figured it out.
right. But of course, there wasn't a video, but I guess there could have been.
Oh, I see video. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So we could be
But
faked right now.
that's going to be illegal under Trump, right? If it's
Well, the
porn.
porn would, yeah, the porn
Yeah,
would, but maybe not the scams. Probably not. He seems to
yeah,
be ending all enforcement of like fraud and scams because that's
yeah,
all he does is fraud and scams. Um,
yeah. Sam, I brought this up a few months ago, but you know that the porn industry was hit really hard. There's a woman that wrote a book about this, and this is kind of interesting. I think it's Chase that had an interest in Pornhub and the related businesses or the associated businesses.
Chase Manhattan.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I would
So,
think established financial firms would steer clear of a controversial business like that.
well, it was highly profitable. It's the second, no,
Yeah.
third or fourth most, it was most visited website on on the
Yeah.
internet. And there was a lot of money. It's owned by an Austrian and with several others, and there's some dealings going on. But there are a number of women, I think there are 50 women that are suing. And, it's quite wealthy. There's a lot of money that was made off of this.
Yeah.
And I think the Austrian is trying to buy Pornhub back and supporting the women so that he can buy it back for pennies on the dollar.
And the women are suing because they were underage when filmed or something.
Underage,
Yeah.
yeah, non-consensual, all kinds of
Uh,
disgusting
well,
things.
that's pretty serious crime.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. She wrote
Yeah.
a book about it, and you can find her story or interviews with her on YouTube. I don't recall her name right now.
Yeah. I was watching some YouTube. I was watching music reaction videos, and I saw this video of Jasmine Crockett fighting with the head of the Supreme Court and getting punished with a $200,000 fine. And then I found out it was completely fake, totally artificial. It was presented as a news story. And I searched for where's the news about this. Apparently, it never happened. There's just videos out there making up completely fake, exciting news stories like that. So,
Well, it's like the AI briefs being submitted to federal court.
yep, yep. And so So I've added up what's happened due to Doge. And Doge has lost an incredible amount of government money. In case anybody thought they actually saved money, they claimed they were going to cut 2 trillion, but all they actually cut was 135 billion, and that's pretty much a fake number. They cut much less, but the firing and rehiring thousands of public sector workers could cost far more than that. And the fact that they cut the IRS has deprived the government of at least 500 billion because they can't catch the tax cheaters anymore. So it sort of points out the point of Doge was never to save money. It was to make the rich richer, I think. It was the point of
Yeah,
it was for him to cut all the regulations on his businesses and to just shovel government money into his own pocket. That's what it was.
yeah. I think the evidence supports that.
Yep. Uh, And let's see, I got a couple more of these. This one was pretty exciting. Scientific researchers at the University of Zurich decided to run a psychology experiment. So they got AI bots and told them to post really controversial things on Reddit and ran it for 6 months or so to see how well they could persuade people to change their viewpoint on political issues. And they did all this without anybody's permission or knowledge, which I don't think you could do in the United States or anywhere. In fact, now they've had to say they won't identify themselves by their names and they're not going to publish the paper because I don't think you can do any kind of research on human subjects without passing an ethics review. I used to do this. You had to pass an
Right.
ethics review and telling them that you're going to lie to them, pretend to be somebody that's fake and persuade them of stuff. I don't think you can get approval for all that without telling them. And it certainly
Yeah.
broke the terms of service of Reddit, but I think it also broke the ethics requirement of whatever university they're at. So anyway, now they admitted they did it all without admitting their names.
Yeah. Sam, let me kind of back up here for a
Yeah.
second. It made me think of something. The Pornhub person, this woman who's really exposed Pornhub and is supporting all these women. She has a supporting organization. With all these conspiracies, you'd think that somebody, about deaths and people being killed,
Yeah.
you'd think with a business that's the third, fourth most popular on the internet, that there's enough money that somebody would bump her off. I'm not encouraging that,
Well,
but
it happens a lot less than you'd think. I was surprised
yeah,
nobody killed Obama. I was surprised nobody killed Trump. I think the point is, if you look at the people that actually do kill somebody, like this Luigi guy, they always seem to just be crazy. They're not rational
yeah,
actors that are pushing an agenda. They're just the most unstable among us who will just go nuts. I think the point is the consequences of actually killing a prominent figure are so bad that it really doesn't pass anybody's logical test. Would this really improve your life or fix whatever problem you're upset about? And
right,
so I think
right.
only crackpots would do it. And We're just finding out who's in the 0.1% fringe of like mental stability.
Yeah, and if I remember right, it was Squeaky Fromm that shot the president, meaning Reagan,
Yeah, she
didn't
was also
kill him.
nuts, right? Just to have some,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Sirhan with Kennedy.
And who was it that thought he was going to win the love of Jodie Foster by shooting the president?
Oh,
There was some guy did that.
Hinckley.
Yeah, it's always just complete nuts, you know. Like this idiot that went into like Nancy Pelosi's house and hit her husband with a hammer. He didn't have any political agenda or any message or anything intelligent he was doing. He was just crazy, you know.
Yeah, and Oswald, I would argue, same category.
Yeah, and you know that seems to be the case. I mean, you have a political fight in your country, but it really seems like 99.99% of us know that violence is not the answer.
And who was it? Who are the other two? Was it Buchanan who was shot?
I don't know. I think one's before my time. And Lincoln, of
Yeah,
course. Now, by
yeah,
the way, John
Lincoln.
Wilkes Booth, I think, actually was in favor of slavery, and that execution kind of made sense and kind of accomplished its goal. So that's the exception.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It was Garfield.
Yeah, not know anything
Garfield was
about him.
shot. McKinley was shot.
Yeah.
And Garfield was 1881. What's notable about Garfield is that that was a gentleman who was in politics and involved in a religious sect in New York that was called, you probably know this if you have the silverware, Oneida. You ever heard of Oneida
I don't think so.
silverware? Flatware? Uh, it's isn't there a town in New York called Oneida?
There could be.
Flatware. He was doing it because the party was divided and that McKinley won, and he thought by shooting McKinley that it would kind of combine or cohese the party again.
Hmm. Well,
And
yeah.
and I believe it's or Odin. No, it's I thought it was Oneida. Yeah, Oneida, Oneida.
Mhm.
And they were kind of like an Amish community. And they were really popular, so popular on weekends that the train company, this is back in the 1800s, made a rail spur and put in a train station so people could get off and kind of walk around like a living history,
Hmm.
kind of village. But
Yeah.
this was a real one. And then the people in the religious sect started making things, selling jam and, clothing and things. And then they got into flatware and started selling.
But what did they have to do with killing the president?
Well, the leader who started that was in the early 1800s, was getting old, and the gentleman that shot the president thought he would take it over.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a division between the Mormon sect when Brigham Young, pardon me, when Joseph Smith was killed.
Oh,
Joseph
he
Smith.
shot the leader of that religion. I thought he
No,
shot
no,
the
no.
judge
He
guys.
didn't shoot. No, no. He was ousted by the religion.
Hmm.
So he got into politics and he shot McKinley over that.
Um, it doesn't sound like he had any rational plan of how this would benefit him.
Well, the benefit that he thought would there was a division in the party, much like the tea bags or the baggers or whatever they called
Carpetbaggers.
those about a decade ago.
Yeah.
And he thought this would unite it by killing
Oh,
off
okay.
McKinley.
Okay.
So it was, I would say it's sort of a one person's fantasy
Yeah.
instead of, right, a cohesive group.
This is like Charles Manson's Helter Skelter, where he thought he was
Yeah.
going to ignite. Yeah. He had some theory where he was going to somehow rise to power out of this nonsense, poorly thought out. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we could also say that was the Symbionese Liberation Army, kind of
Yeah. They
same
had some.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say,
I call these people all crackpots. They feel
yeah.
they
Yeah.
badly misunderstand the truth of the world, and their actions are not logically aimed towards achieving anything good.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got one more, just an easy
Okay.
one. This is why I don't like Kali. So Kali lost their code signing key. So they had to make a new code signing key, so you're not going to be able to update any of your Kali machines without going through manual steps to install the new code signing key. So all your Kali updates are going to fail, and you should know that's why. And I've had problems at Kali for decades. They're pretty sloppy. They keep breaking things. It's pretty annoying. That's why I switched to just using plain old Debian.
All right. Does Debian have the equivalent of Kali with all the tools?
No, it doesn't have all the tools, but I'm not doing all the pen testing, so I don't need all those tools.
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
install the tools I need. But I get a
Yeah.
much more, yeah, that's all. But Kali, has like a couple of hundred pre-installed tools. That's the advantage, but they don't
Right.
maintain it properly. So every new version breaks a bunch of those tools. So it's very annoying and it has a lot of bugs. They don't seem to have enough quality control. So what you actually have to do if you're a pen tester is you have to archive old versions of Kali where the tool you love works, which is pretty stupid, but that's what you have to do if you want those tools to work reliably.
Yeah. And why can't they just fix it?
Well, I guess it's just a team of volunteers and they only care about like the new exciting tool and they don't really worry about the old tool that relied on some old thing that's not working anymore. They don't really test them all, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
So what
Okay.
happens to me, of course, is I would write a homework project and after a few years, it doesn't work anymore because the latest version of Kali broke that tool.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so whereas
Okay.
if you just use Debian, boy, Debian is great. I wrote projects on Debian 8 and they still work fine on Debian 12. Debian is a conservative. They don't break the old stuff when they put on new stuff. You can keep doing things the same old way, which I appreciate.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it. I see. Okay.
yeah. All right. Anyway, that's it for me. Have you got any more?
Nope. That's it for me this time.
All right.
See what happens.
All right. We'll have another one of these on Friday then.
You got it. Thanks, Sam.
All right.